All right, and our next session is by Jim Brady, the CEO of Spirited Media. And Jim has a long history in digital media, stretching back to the mid-90s at WashingtonPost.com, then known as Digital Inc. And then through various iterations, Jim became the editor of WashingtonPost.com, but that was after, at AOL, he was a vice president of a production group there and also head of the news and sports departments there. And then after leaving both of those jobs, he ended up creating news sites that served both initially the Washington, D.C. area and now other urban areas, sticking with the urban theme here, and connecting in cities, connecting people. So Jim has now focused on mobile sites, and in particular mobile first, mobile only, and the ways to do that, the ways to create a revenue model, and the ways to design for the mobile audience. So with that, Jim Brady.
All right. All right.
Many of ours from WashingtonPost.com days.
Yeah. That's what happens when you've been around forever. So I'm going to talk a little bit, following up on Judd's presentation. He talked a lot about tools. I'm going to talk about one tool, one specific tool that we focus on most of our time, because we're a startup. We don't have a ton of people. We don't have a ton of resources. Our technology needs are limited. So we focus on satisfying one tool, which is the brain of the people on the other end of the phone or the other end of the computer. So what I want to talk a little bit about is just the psychology of the mobile consumer and what we try to do to reach them, rather than get into tools we use to reach them. Because the truth is, we don't use a lot of very complex storytelling mobile tools because we don't have that many people, we don't have that much money. And so we just focus on how do we build a connection with those people, and I'll walk through some of that now. So I want to give you a little bit of background on the company. I'll blow through this pretty quickly, but I formed the company in 2014 because I think everybody knows local news is dangerously broken. This is, this is sort of the summary slide of all of it, but all of us know this kind of cascading problem here. There are legacy news organizations are tied to rapidly shrinking revenue streams. Unfortunately, they still need to focus on those revenue streams to stay in business, so their focus remains on print or on broadcast and not on digital. So obviously the revenue's there. Where there is digital revenue, it's primarily on desktop, because that's where you can put all the ads and all the pop-ups and all the stuff that makes money. We're on the mobile screen where your real estate is limited. You can do a lot of that stuff, but it's even more intrusive on a mobile phone or tablet than it is on a desktop. So even where they are focused on digital, it's on the shrinking side of the usership or user base. So obviously they have to maintain these products with presses and complicated broadcast systems. So all of these things, they're getting smaller, morale's terrible. And all of this has basically left them with the reality that really we were looking at, which is legacy news organizations are not, in fact, they're poorly positioned to serve the local news consumer of the future. That how big is your average local newsroom going to be in 5 years? Who knows? But they're clearly getting smaller and smaller, and that ride down in terms of staff has not gotten anywhere close to ending yet. So we're trying to build something from the ground up that thinks the way that the consumer we're trying to reach thinks. So there's lots of sites out there trying to do what we're doing. This is just a sample of a lot of other sites that are out there trying to hit some of these things pixelate a little bit on a big screen. I'm sorry. But we're one of those, and what we're doing is we have 3 sites right now. We have Billy Penn in Philadelphia, the Incline in Pittsburgh, and Denverite in Denver. The first 2 we launched ourselves, the third we acquired earlier this year, and we have almost 30 full-time employees now. And the basic principle is this. So we're aimed at 40 and younger. By doing that, automatically you have to focus on the mobile phone as a primary device, because that's where those folks are consuming news, for the most part. Not totally, but obviously largely. But almost everything on this list is actually somewhat tied to the mobile experience, which is, we're focused on clean user experience and ease of consumer use. If you go to any of the sites that we have, you'll see there are no pop-ups, no interstitials, no autoplay video, no 30 slideshows, just so we can make a slideshow and get 30 impressions. The whole idea of this is that you should be able to get in, get out, find what you want, and do that as many times a day as you want without us getting in the way of that experience. So that's obviously focused on the mobile side of things. We're heavily curated, again, in a world in which people want to find their news in one place and be as efficient as possible. we'll put links up to anything in Philadelphia that we think is interesting to the audience we're trying to reach. So the Philly Inquirer, Philly Magazine, Technically Philly, anybody writes a story we think is good for the audience, we just link them straight out to that. In addition to putting up the stuff we're producing every day, we're producing like 10 to 12 original pieces a day in Philadelphia, and probably 8 to 10 in Pittsburgh, and 15 to 20 in Denver. So we're all local all the time. We're distributed heavily via social, again, an obvious tie to mobile. And maybe most importantly, monetized primarily via events, not on display advertising. Because look, with all this real estate we have to do advertising, we couldn't make anything if we decided advertising was our primary model. So the mobile phone also kind of, if we didn't already believe this, because the truth is we already believed we didn't want to have an ad-based model, but even if we wanted to have one, the minute you decide you're going to focus on mobile as a primary device, you can't really have advertising as your primary model unless you want to destroy the user experience right out of the gate, which might make you a little money out of the gate, but it won't last for a particularly long time before people get frustrated. And the part I want to talk a lot about is building deep relationships with consumers, both online and off, for our revenue growth. So when I first did my pitch, somebody said, where's your 2x2 grid? Where's your 2x2 grid that shows how you're going to be different than everybody else? All right, here's a 2x2 grid. Lots of people going after, I don't use the M word anymore because I think it's played out. I'll say it only one time, which is the idea that millennials are like one generation that all think the same way is ridiculous. It's obviously, there's many different types of people in any age classification. So I just stick with the 40 and under as a broad target for us. And there's lots of people going after that audience at a national level, and the boomers are really focused on the traditional products they've been consuming for a long time, and we're trying to get into this upper right space here to say, look, there's a room for somebody to come in and go after the 40 and under set in urban markets, especially because urban populations are increasing right now, especially largely fueled by younger people. So we've been doing this for 3 years now, and I wanted to walk through some of the core concepts of why we do what we do. Some of you have been at this event before will have seen some of this before. I apologize, but I want to just kind of couch it a little bit differently, which is having done mobile first sites for the last 3.5 years now. I want to talk about what we have learned. Some of these things are not so specific to mobile, but I think they're important anyway. The first one should be pretty obvious. If you're not thinking of mobile as your primary output at this point, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if anybody here is getting less than 50% of their traffic via mobile, that probably is actually your fault rather than, we're at about 75% mobile traffic now, and most of the big news organizations I know are in the 60s. So if you're literally at 35 on your mobile, you must have terrible mobile products, because the audience desperately is trying to consume you more on mobile, no matter what your percentage is. But you got to think of it as a primary output, and I'm amazed to this day how often I'm on a bunch of advisory boards, and on those boards I'm often shown hey, I'm very much the token digital guy on many of these boards that I'm on, the guy they bring all the digital stuff to, like I'm some Svengali who understands all things digital and nothing else. But they bring redesigns, and what's the first redesign that somebody always brings to you when they want to show you the redesign is the home page of the desktop site. Right, and if you put a grid together and said, I have a mobile front page, I have a mobile home page and a mobile article page, and I have a desktop front page and a desktop article page, I think it's pretty obvious that the desktop homepage is the least of the four, is the least important of the four by a significant distance. But somehow in legacy newsrooms, that's still the first thing everybody wants to redesign is the homepage, right? Because everybody's interested in the homepage, because the homepage is sort of a roadmap of how your organization is structured. Every section wants its own. Dan knows this from our time at the Post as well. Every section wants to be represented in the navigation bar and on the homepage, and they don't think at all about the consumer. It's just about is my group represented here. So we kind of threw all that out. Now, if you actually look at Billy Penn or the Incline, especially those two, because Denverite came in more recently, they look much better on a mobile phone and a tablet than they do on desktop. If you call them up on your computer, you'll be like, this site's not that nice looking. It's not. It's 20 to 22% of our traffic on a given day. So why am I going to spend a ton of time making a gorgeous homepage? And that number, by the way, goes down pretty much every month to the point where we'll probably be 90% mobile in a year to 14 months. So why would I spend a whole lot of time redesigning a front page when all my traffic's on mobile? But you have to, if you're going to think of it as your primary output, you have to design that way, you have to publish that way, you have to consume it that way. And I would say one of the big mistakes we made at WashingtonPost.com when I was editor was we would build mobile products and then we wouldn't really look at them that much. And then we'd get complaints and, oh wow, the mobile site's broken. How has the mobile site been broken for 4 hours and nobody knew? Because if the homepage was broken on desktop, we would know within 9 seconds. that was broken, because everybody's looking at it all day. But if you want to actually serve your audience that way, you got to be looking at the same products. And obviously it starts with, we already made the mistake once of trying to take our newspapers and our TV broadcast, primarily newspapers, and jamming them onto a website and saying we want to make it look exactly like the newspaper, except it changes more. But we want to have the same fonts and the same 800 links on the homepage. Right, so that didn't really work. So now that we're doing desktop to mobile, I think we're doing a little bit better than we did the first round, but we're still making the same mistake, which is if you're thinking same content, different screen, you're completely wrong, which I think most of the people in this room, being that you're at this conference, probably already know. But I always use the example of this is the desktop. Look at all that space, lots of room there, and it doesn't get that cluttered. You try to take all this stuff and put it in an apartment, you get this, right? You're a hoarder. You basically can't figure out what you want to throw out. And the truth is you can't have a mobile front page that has everything that's on your desktop site. You just can't. You can't have all the stuff in the right rail. You can't have the 87 section links on the front page. You got to be very precise in what it is you put out there, because in that small screen space, you're only giving people a very quick moment to decide what they're going to click on. And if you present them with 10 things, and you could all look at this research and probably have all seen it before, there's a certain point where you put too many choices in front of somebody, they completely lock up, right? Whether it's which soft drink do you want to have, you just got to give people a limited number of things to look at, and I think that's one of the lessons. If you look at our site, it's one stream right down the middle. Here's all the stories that we either wrote or curated today, and there's nothing else on that. There's nothing. We're not going to distract you with anything but some minor navigation and some ads that are inserted in that stream, but that's it. And 2 leads to the second one, which is cleaning up user experiences. I mean, how many people in here think the average user experience of the United States newspaper site is exciting and useful? Anybody here think I love kicking around on United States newspapers, or really any newspaper sites, but US is probably the worst, right? So the load time has to be fast. And this is still a lesson that no, the content's good enough, people will wait 8 seconds for this page to load. They will not. They just won't. They will be gone in a heartbeat. They don't care how good your content is. If they can't get to it, they don't even know, right? So it's got to be fast. And so this is what you see a lot feels like when you're looking at a lot of US newspaper sites. And here's the problem. So this is a couple of years old. I doubt it's gotten any better. But basically it shows that the average load time of all sites in the United States is 5 seconds. US newspaper sites, 17. And I said this last year. If I stood up here for 17 seconds and didn't say anything, it would get awkward. It would be uncomfortable. What is he doing? Why is he standing up there not doing anything? But 17 seconds is a long time. And we've let our sites get completely out of control because we just believe the content's good enough that people will put up with that crap, and they won't. So you got to take care of user experience, which also feeds nicely into just taking stuff off the homepage and not putting everything, hiding everything in your page somewhere. So you got to dump the clutter. Every single thing on a mobile page should have a purpose, right? There shouldn't be any, the right rail is a great example. A lot of, why, and I'll say that we failed this one for a while, and we're just cleaning it up now. We have a right rail on our desktop, which is fine. Maybe not even fine on desktop, but you can tolerate it on desktop. But on mobile, we kind of put it at the bottom of the stream, so you still get links to some of our previous articles. We're getting rid of all that, because the truth is nobody even scrolled down to get to those. The only thing that they get to is the basic stories of the day, and that's it. So even taking those 15 links at the bottom off will save a quarter second, a half a second of load time, and that matters. So you got to be able to ask yourself every day, everything that we have on this screen, it's got to be here for some reason, right? I mean, it can't just be here because we want people to find previous stories that we wrote on the same topic. Well, if the click-through on those is 0.0001, there's no reason to have them there. Just get rid of them and help your load time. So you should ask yourself kind of on a monthly or worst case quarterly basis, review everything you have on these pages and make sure they're there for some reason and they're just not there because they've been there forever. That's why most things are on home pages. Why is that there? It's always been there. Right? You got to set a schedule for figuring out whether something is still earning that space, if it ever did at all. There was one time at WashingtonPost.com, I think we counted 470 links on the homepage. 470 links, and we're screen after screen after screen. If you want to scroll down to get the Book World headlines, on the 11th screen down, good for you. I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, but we did it, and we killed the load time of that page. So you got to dump the clutter, and you got to ask those hard questions. A good example is this. This is great. We got a banner, we got an ad, we have a subscription thing, and look, you almost have a headline. Oh, by the way, this is top news, not middle news, not bottom news, but top news, because you should know that despite the fact it's at the top, it needs the label top news. So there's like nothing on this page that's useful. You know there's a politics story, you're not going to be able to find it right out of the gate. So this is the kind of thing that everybody's trying to make. They're trying to make money here, I get that. But would you come back to this if every time you came up you had to knock this thing down, close this, and just be clean about it. Just have one little ad at the bottom, a nice big strong, I also should have pointed out that there was nothing visual on here at all. You have a nice big visual here. And one big headline and a nice branding, and it's pretty clean. But your focus is completely on this. And the other previous page, your focus could be on 7 different things. So just try to follow that mantra of don't overcomplicate this. Because the most precious commodity we have is consumers' time. So if you think about all the technology, there's all these laws, Moore's Law, about how much faster processing time is going to get and how much better technology is going to continue to get. But the one thing that's never going to change is we have 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. And like time is never going to expand because technology gets better. And so we as consumers only have so much time to consume stuff. And every minute we waste of that person's time is less likely that they'll come back to do it again. So we have to think about that as like the primary metric. And the shorthand I always use for that is we view the most important metric we have is time well spent, which is not really quantifiable, but like we want to produce an experience that people will be able to get in, get out, find what they want. Because we know if they do that, we can get them to come back. And I think that's more important than time spent, because I guarantee you, if I told you to find the Cubs game story on this page, or asked you to find something on the Post site, you'd find something faster here. So you'd end up having spent more time on this page. So like, oh look, time spent was 4 minutes. Well, if 3 of those 4 minutes are trying to find something that you can't find, I would argue that's not really a good metric for you. You basically, you might, if you're really desperate for that game, you may actually be patient enough, but you're probably not going to come back over and over again to a site that you can't find anything. So we don't care about time spent. We care about making sure we're using the user's time as well as we can. The next thing, be as intimate with the readers as they are with their mobile devices. Like you see all these photos of people laying in bed reading their phone, or like ignoring their colleagues at dinner or at a meeting to read their phone. People have this very deep, intimate relationship with their device, and like we need to, as a news organization, try to have the same relationship with them that they have with it. So it's got to be much more of an emotional connection. And I'm going to talk on this one a fair amount. So what does that mean, right? So we have lots. These are. Probably can't read them here, but we want is this kind of reaction, like love Billy Penn. There's another one on the next page, which is F for FFS, I love Billy Penn. And I've had people say to me, I effing love Billy Penn. Like that's what we need. We need people to feel that way about the brand. We don't want like the golf clap. Oh, they do good work. Like that's nice. I mean, it's nice that people think you do good work, but that's not an emotional connection. That's sort of like, I respect you. But I really want, I feel like, as we go forward trying to build brands locally, we got to get people who really love the brands that we have. It can't just be that they just respect them, because there's too many choices out there for people to go to, and they will go to sites that they have an emotional connection to, whether that's a commerce site or whether it's a news site, whether it's anything. So we try really hard to build this kind of relationship with people where they just have this real passion for what it is that we do. And I think this kind of gets to the next part of this subject, which is don't just be of the people, be with them. Because one of my biggest complaints about most legacy news brands, especially newspapers, because TV stations are a little bit better at this, is like we've covered these communities for a long time, but we don't really interact with them as much. We don't have events. We don't meet the people we cover. We kind of we meet the people that we like quote and interview, but we don't meet them as like fellow citizens of a city, and I think we have to decide that we want to be with them in sort of, I'm not going to say with them physically because that sounds odd, but I mean, we need to be in the same space with them, actually meeting them face to face and not just taking phone calls or trading emails. It's got to be an actual engagement there. So this is how we do it. We do it via events. So we'll produce or participate in more than 60 events this year. In fact, that's just Billy Penn. And in fairness, I didn't change Billy Penn. It's actually all 3 of the sites combined are doing more than 60 this year. And we made 86% of our money in 2015 via event sponsorships and ticket sales. It was 65% last year. It'll be about the same this year. But the whole idea here is that we don't do events like really dull, we do events that are fun. We want people at the end of a work day to be able to go out someplace for 2 hours, meet a bunch of interesting people, do something fun, and put some food and some beer in the room, or food and alcohol in the room, or non-alcoholic alternatives as well. But basically, we do movie nights, beer tastings, trivia nights, political watch parties. We did all sorts of stuff around the debates last year in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, where we just got people together to watch the debates or to watch the Steelers in the playoffs. And we would have a Philadelphia sports in the playoffs watch party if any Philadelphia teams made a playoffs anytime recently. But when that happens, we will have those as well. But the idea here is that the events don't have to be that complicated, but we send our newsroom, they go out to these events, they sit there, they talk to people, sit at a table, have a beer with 5 or 6 readers who are sitting there, and it makes a huge difference to the people who read the site when they've met that reporter and they had a drink with that reporter. And by the way, all of this stuff is great for building that deep bond and connection that you want to build. It's really good for getting stories, because those people, a lot of those people work in City Hall, or they work in places where they find out stuff. And we have gotten, most of the big stories that we've gotten at all of our sites have come from people who came to an event, got to know somebody, and then said, I'm going to call Billy Penn because I've met the reporter over there and she's great. And so this comes with it actually comes with a nice journalistic upside as well. But it's, we do a ton of these, and this is the thing that I think that has separated us in terms of building that bond that we want to build. And like, why events, right? They deepen the consumer connection to the brand. So think about if you go to a site that makes its money on advertising, and you hit 10 pages, you've just helped the site make money. But you probably had to close a pop-up ad in there somewhere, and you probably had to figure out where that autoplay video was playing that you hear but can't find. So it's a quid pro quo. You helped the site make some money, but we didn't love it. It wasn't a great experience. You have an event, and you get people to actually pay to come to the event, and they have a great time, and they go back out on the street saying, Billy Penn just had an awesome event, or the Incline just had an awesome event. You've now made money and sent people back out into the market who actually are saying good things about you. It's not a quid pro quo. You're actually taking the fact you're making money, and you're getting people out there saying nice things about what you're doing, which is a nicer way to make money. It's also a little bit less subject to economic shifts in advertising, so you have a little bit more control over your own fate. There's always things going on in a city that people want to talk about, so while you might have some economic impact if there's a recession, it's not the same way it hits advertising, which is, of course, hard. And I think it also leverages the biggest advantage we have. People love to talk about local publishing, local doesn't scale, local's got all these disadvantages, local's terrible. But the one thing local has is the people who read you are all physically in that market. You can have events and get them all to show up someplace and get to know each other, which is a massive advantage. And I think the one thing we discovered early on is when you're a news site and you go to big advertisers and try to sell them on why they should buy advertising on your site, they all take a wait and see approach, come back to me in 9 months or a year when you've built a little bit of an audience. But we've had events, the good example was Comcast, kind of a big deal in Philadelphia, Comcast, and we tried to get them to buy some advertising. They didn't do it right out of the gate. But then we had an event, which was we were honoring the 15 up-and-coming entrepreneurs under the age of 40 in Philadelphia. Comcast happens to be building a huge tower next to its existing huge tower that they want to put a lot of entrepreneurs in there, a little bit of a incubator model. They really wanted to meet those 15 people we had on their list and all the people who would come to that event. So they sponsored that event 4 months after we launched. We never would have gotten Comcast to give us money for advertising, but we got them to sponsor an event because it was the right event at the right time and they couldn't kick us down the road for another 6 to 9 months. So events are just a nice, and advertisers, frankly, are looking for events more now than they were before as well. So this has been a really important thing. This was our 1-year anniversary party, which you can see we had at a very high-end bowling alley, which is a kind of our style. High-end bowling alley. We don't do ballrooms. We don't do rubber chicken dinners. We don't do anything that's like those events that maybe I speak for myself, but I'm guessing probably most people would agree. Those horrible events where you go to and sit there for 3 hours and eat terrible food and watch a program and can't really talk to the people at your table or any of the people at any of the other tables. Our whole formula is drinks, food, interesting people, throw them into a room for 2 hours and get the hell out of the way. We literally are not allowed, our rule is no more than 20% of any of our events can be people talking up on a stage commanding the whole room. The rest of it is just mixers and people getting to meet each other, and that's what they want. And one of the other things we do, how we take advantage of mobile here, is at the door we'll basically, not at the big gala event, but the other events that we do, all the watch parties and the trivia nights, when you get them to the door, if you want to get in for free, you got to show us that you follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the newsletter, or like us on Facebook. And if you can't show us any of those things, you can do it right there and get in for free, but you got to show us that you're connected to us in some way before you can come in and get that drink. And so I think that's how we use the mobile device, the ubiquity of that device well, which is we've gotten a lot of followers, a lot of newsletter subscribers, because basically we said, like, the only thing between you and a free drink is like following us somewhere. And you know, some people, if they really want to be aggressive about it, can like unfollow the minute they walk out the door. But we all know the stats on how many people like go back and unfollow things that they followed. It's pretty low. So it's a good arrangement for us. So why events? Again, we're going after that. I'm not going to say the word, but you can see it on the screen there. But 56% say the reason they signed up for a brand's email is because of an event. So a nice connection to newsletter signups. And we get a lot of newsletter signups at our events. 67% said the reason they follow a brand on social media is because of an event. And this is a 2-year-old study, but I doubt it's changed much based on the number of people focusing on events now. And when asked what's the main reason you chose to attend a brand event? Okay, topics. We don't do speakers, but everything else there is good. Networking opportunities are the heart of what we do. Free booze or food. Pretty much most of the events are sponsored, so usually the food is free. And free stuff for swag, we give out free stuff like t-shirts and sponsor stuff at every event. So we're kind of in all of these areas. And then the other piece of this, events. So we kind of have this chain right now. Events help you build your newsletter subscribers. Your newsletter subscribers are by far your best opportunity for members. So we're launching membership in Q1 2018, which is going to be an events-based thing. It's not it's not a paywall called some other name. The site's still going to be free as it is now, but what it's going to be is it's going to be events that we think are a bit of a level up. So if we can get the mayor of Philadelphia to come do a Q&A twice a year with people who are members of Billy Penn's site, or the mayor of Pittsburgh, or get them into places they can't get into on their own. We can do a tour of the Steelers locker room, or the tour of the Broncos locker room, or that special City Hall tour in Philadelphia that you can only get if you're a VIP. Like, we can get that. We just get a bunch of people together and go through it. So it's more access events, whether it's to people or places you can't get into. And for that, we're going to ask people to pay. Now, we know some percentage of people are just going to pay because they like what we do. The research all shows that some people will just give you money because they like you. But obviously, we want to have a real program here that's meaningful. And we also want to do things like, potentially, we haven't decided for sure on this yet, but like a public Slack channel, so that people can follow like what the newsroom's up to all day long. So if they go to Billy Penn, they can also then, if they're a member, they can go into this part of the site where they can see the reporters talking about what we're covering today. And I just know from a lot of years doing this, even if working in media sometimes drive all of us absolutely nuts and there's nothing we want to do more on a weekend than get the hell away from it, like, people really are fascinated with media. They really are interested in what goes on in a newsroom and how the sausage is made every day and all that. And so by doing a Slack channel and like posting a budget and saying Anna's now off to cover the press conference, over at City Hall, like, we know people will like that because we just know it gives people the sense that they're seeing stuff other people don't. So we'll do that as well. But all of these things, again, are things that have to work, in the context of the overall strategy. And then we're going to do 3 range-based levels of membership here, which is, I won't bore you with the details of that at this point. But these are all kind of steps toward getting us to where we want to be. So this one isn't specific to mobile, but it's an important one, which is, when you're working in any of these, certainly at a startup, you got to turn negatives into positives. So these are all the things you hear when you start something. You're understaffed, you have no infrastructure, you can't cover everything, got no history, no brand recognition, no revenue, no voice, no culture, right? Then or you can say, I'm not overstaffed, which is frankly the battle a lot of newspapers are fighting right now. They can't figure out how to structure for the future because they're continually getting smaller and smaller. Like, with very little overhead, which is lovely, I can cover anything. I can't cover everything, but I can cover anything. I'm not so beat dependent that I have 4 people who are untouchable because they have to go to these 4 meetings every day. I can send any of the people we have in Philadelphia anywhere, any day. And that's a great freedom to have. But we also don't have any history to overcome, so we can build the relationships with consumers that I think news organizations like newspapers struggle to build because it's not what they've done for a long time. We can create whatever identity we want. We want to create a fun identity that's a little more accessible. We have no revenue crisis either. I mean, I'm not saying we're killing it on revenue yet, but we're not in that mode where like we're losing millions of dollars every quarter and we've got to figure out how to keep up. And we can make the voice what we want and obviously create the culture. So there's a lot of opportunity when you just do something anew. And it's the second time I've really been able to do something completely anew. And then just have fun. I think if you look at people, as they carry these phones around on a daily basis, it's a constant companion and it needs to reflect lots of different moods. And I think news organizations have struggled to communicate fun for a while. I'm not just talking about the last year when everything's been a little bit crazier, but I mean just for a very long time. Newspapers don't have a lot of fun stuff in it, right? If it leads, it bleeds is the classic TV trope, and the newspaper is often full of lots of stories that are not necessarily uplifting and fun. And but we got to remember that people need to have fun in their day, and if they're carrying this device around all day, and every time they look at it, some other terrible thing is on there, it's probably going to have some impact on how often you're looking at the news. So we also just we have to be more fun. And you've got to be, and also when you're on a mobile device, you better get that headline to pop real fast. And so you can't write these. To this day, you still look at a lot of Twitter feeds of news organizations, and it's like boring headline, link. And you're like, when are you guys going to learn? Like, this thing is scrolling past people, so fast. It's got to stand out. You can't say "for indicted in check kiting scheme." You got to find some really interesting thing in that story and pull it out. So we do this all the time, with my favorite one being Philly GOP to city fire ascot-clad wine-sipping F. Trump graffiti lawyer. Like, you kind of have to read that story now. And we got this guy was carrying a glass of wine wearing an ascot and spray painting F. Trump on things. So it was like, it's kind of an interesting story. But you got to have some fun, and you got to go outside the realm of the normal voice. And I also like bull fatally shot trying to escape Philly. Yes, we had a bull on the main interstate in Philadelphia, escaped from a truck on the way to the slaughterhouse. So he obviously knew where he was headed and made a break. And also, let's have some fun by doing experiential stuff. So, we had one of our reporters who loved just trying things. She rappelled down a building. She slept outside as part of a charity thing for the homeless. She participated in the Mummers Parade. And one of our reporters in Pittsburgh drove a driverless Uber. And so that is it's putting yourself in a position. I won't even talk about the 20 courses and 11 beers that Anna had at Han Dynasty. It didn't work for 2 days after that, appropriately. But I mean, it's trying to let's experience this city, and let's not just write about the lousy things that are happening, although we do that too. But let's try to actually give people a sense of what life is like in this city, because life isn't actually murders and fires and car crashes, and life is restaurants and bars and fun experiences you can have. And so being a lot more fun is important as well. And obviously almost all of these things are loaded up with, we did videos on all of these that did really well on mobile as well, because it's kind of fun to see these reporters come to life when they can in the stories like this. And then even this was we got mocked for this in Philadelphia when there was a mayoral race a couple years ago. We made emojis for all the people running for mayor, right? And it was oh, these new guys, that's so childish, to do emojis, it's so cliche. Well, in our office right now, we have this with all of these mayoral candidates who signed them, and 2 of them asked for their emoji. Can you send me that? I'd love to have it, right? So it got us known in the market really quickly by people who were like, what are those? Who are you guys? Because we were literally 2 months old when we did this. And it was a great way to get noticed really quickly. And it was and I remember a friend of mine from the Inquirer said, Philadelphia Inquirer would never do something like that. I'm like, exactly. It's exactly right. That's why we're going to do it, because you're not going to do it. And when Tom Wolf was inaugurated the mayor of the governor of Pennsylvania, the staff came to me and said, we want to try something really interesting, or different. Instead of just being the 100th site to tweet out everything Tom Wolf says, because everybody will be in the State House type, it'd be boring. We're going to live emoji his speech. So whatever he says, we're going to translate it into emoji. It was that sounds terrible. As somebody who's feels like they're pretty progressive, even I was scared by that one. We're going to be mocked. And within 30 minutes, people in the State House were retweeting it, this is better than the speech. Obviously, that was partisans, but they were enjoying it. So if he said we need to put more money into schools, it was $ school, little school, thumbs up, right? And people were loving it. And it was one of those things, again, our Twitter following went up 300 that day. And so it was just a way to get the word out. But I think it showed early on, we're going to be different. We're going to try to have some fun. We're still living within the parameters of journalism, but we're not going to be too locked into it, because times have changed and people need a little laugh in their lives on a daily basis. And this one, this is obviously very connected to social, but just be a connector. If you ask me, the one complete mystery of strategy of legacy news organizations is they still don't link out. They still think the only content that matters is the stuff we produce. And anything else that's produced in this town is not of value because we didn't produce it, which is ludicrous, right? As every day in every market in this country, multiple news organizations are putting out stuff that's interesting to the audience. And if you're not willing to share that with them, shame on you, because it's actually good for business. Because if people decide that you're the place they can start their day to find 10 interesting stories, even if you only wrote 4 of them, they'll come back to you every day and do that. But if they realize that you never link to anything else, you can't be their main source, their only source, because they know that you're cutting them off from the rest of this world that is producing stuff that you're interested in. So a good example of that was the Amtrak crash that happened about 7 months after we launched. It was the first example of everybody in the city getting the strategy of what we'd been doing since launch. Was that day when that train crashed, like we started aggregating all the national organizations, the local organizations. Anytime something new was broken that we didn't already know, we would link, whether it was Reuters or AP or the Inquirer or whatever, and then we were supplementing it with our own stories. But as time went on, we ended up tweeting more about that crash in the first 24 hours after it happened than anybody else in town. We did 126 tweets about it. The Inquirer did 82. The Philly.com did 66. I mean, we did more than anybody. And the whole idea was we became the place people went to find out what was going on for the crash, because they knew that we were not afraid to link to anybody. They weren't going to miss anything. And I think that was when we had that first kick where people got, oh, they do this every day too. Like they find interesting stuff every day. It's not just the Amtrak crash, but they find good stories every day. And that was a real time where we really took off. And when people say, but why would I want to link out? Why would I want to show other people in town that these other sites are out there? It's like, A, they already know they're there. Like the people aren't idiots. They know that there's other sites in town. And two, if you're looking for sites that have done okay linking to other sites, you could cite Google or Facebook or Twitter. There's lots of people who've used being the pass-through to build a pretty good business, or at least a pretty popular site. Maybe in the case of Twitter, not maybe a good business yet, but certainly one that is positioned to be a good business based on its usage. And so, yes, and we like to have the Brian Stelter link in there too, because we very much appreciated that link. But we were listed first as local sources on Philly to follow for this, because we really did a good job on it, and everybody saw that. So being a connector is really important too, and then being a connector in the events, which is we know that we're responsible for a bunch of job changes where people met at an event and somebody recruited somebody else to a different job, grants that have been received by people because they met somebody at an event that they have ended up applying for a grant for. So we also are connecting people through the events. And then don't even try to answer the question of where we're going to be in 5 years, because nobody knows. Right? Anybody who says they know the answer to where we're going to be in 5 years is lying to you, and you should believe nothing else they say after that, because none of us know. The media changes incredibly quickly. It's been doing it for 22 years. If you'd asked me every one of the last 22 years where we were going to be in 5 years, I would have been wrong every time. But the difference is that you have to create newsrooms flexible enough to adjust to whatever does come along. You have to find people whose minds are willing to bend to wherever they need to bend. So you just can't hire people who are very much like, this is the thing I know how to do, and God, I hope it doesn't change, because it's going to change. And so you got to hire around flexibility, and that means having people trying lots of different devices. And you need to have, we have a whole bunch of different device types that we look at, when we're looking at things on mobile, whether it's, obviously various different types of tablets and Androids and iPhones, and we got to be on all of those devices to see where we are. But you also have to be playing around with all the new technologies that are out there and text messaging. And so, so just hire people who find anything new to be interesting, and you'll probably be okay. So that's it. That was just the sort of summary of things that have been learned. Like I said, it's not a full-on mobile thing, but I thought you've been hearing about mobile things for a day and a half now, and I wanted to do a bigger kind of, at least a step back in terms of we are focused on mobile, but again, it's much more about how to attract the actual mobile consumer and how to approach them in a way that it's accessible rather than like more of a tool-based approach. It's more of a psychological approach than a tool-based one. So glad to take any questions or.
Jim, what are your strategies for two-way communication on the Billy Penn O&O site?
Like on the social media?
No, on billypenn.com. When somebody's there, what's your approach to getting a conversation going with them?
On the site itself, not as much. We focus more on social. We wanted to limit how many different places we were having conversations so we would have conversations. So we basically apply to everything on social, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. We never launched comments on the site because the truth is social media sort of made comments on the site somewhat useless, in my opinion. There's another thing you had to keep an eye out for, but the number wasn't that high. But if you left it untended, it could get ugly. So we just decided to push people more to social media and in-person engagement. But basically, the instructions everybody has at all the sites is be responsive on social media outside of just straight trolling. Somebody asks you a good question about the story, you just post and answer it. And if you somebody asks, why didn't you interview the mayor for this story? And you realize that that was a bad decision, you should say, we didn't, and we probably should have. So just be honest, be open, and don't let things go unanswered if they're legitimate questions, because I think that's a frustration a lot of people have on social is news organizations are out there and people send them questions back and it just goes into a black hole. And yes, if you're the Washington Post or the New York Times, it's a little more complex than if you're Billy Penn. But even much smaller news organizations, I think, don't do a good job of actually engaging with people who ask reasonable questions.
What have you done that completely failed?
Many things. Well, one thing we've done that still exists but has failed to this point is we have a feature that I love called Follow This Story. And basically what it means is if the Cosby trial is happening and we're covering the Cosby trial, you can click a button, enter your email address, and get an update every single time we update that story. Like not some broad thing like world or sports, but like literally the Bill Cosby trial. Every time we publish anything on this trial, we'll automatically email you that story. Like the open rate on those is like 55%. But we just have never been able to figure out how to get people to use it. And we've moved it around 6 times. I mean, to the point where even the people who use it now can't find it probably because we moved it too many times. So we're trying one last shot at it to really make it stand out. But it's a feature I love and a feature that people who have seen it say like, I want that feature. How did you guys build that? But yet we just can't figure out how to make it work on the site in a way that we feel like it should. Because I mean, again, if you've signed up to follow a specific story, you should have a good open rate on that. But people have to find the feature first. So I still think, despite all that, we have that, and the reason we've tried it 6 times, by the way, is to go back to something I said earlier. Look at everything on your site and try to assess if it's working every quarter. And we've looked at that thing every quarter since 2014 and been like, it's just not working the way we think it should. Now, at some point, maybe it's not that great a feature. At some point, you have to just ask yourself, maybe it's not that great. But when you see that click-through, you feel like there's something there, but we just cannot quite figure out how to get it to work. And I think we've had, we made the mistake early on of, what hasn't worked, I'll tell you, is sports stuff does okay for us, but like in a city as crazy about sports as Philadelphia, it's never really taken off the way we thought it would. So that's, again, you have to assess your beats and or we don't really have beats, but like subject areas that you occasionally cover. But I could give you a much longer list than that. But and we've written some stories that we thought were hilarious and edgy and got attacked for them for being insensitive. So, but you work in media for 10 minutes, that's going to happen. So I wouldn't say that makes us unique.
What do you think about homeless media, like Now This?
Where was that question? I'm sorry.
What do you think about, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see where it was coming from. Homeless media?
Homeless media.
What does that define?
Media that don't have a...
Oh, don't have an actual site?
Don't have an actual site.
Yeah. I think that's it's not a problem. I can see the advantage of it, but at the same time, the cost of us having sites is tiny because we don't have a homepage out of it, right? It's just a stream. Right? We're just dumping a stream onto the front page every day. So I get why people pursue that because it can be a real, it can certainly save you money to not have a site you're maintaining. You just put all your money into producing content and distributing it via other platforms. I think it's a worthwhile strategy to try for us. What we're trying to do is a bit old school, but it's like we want to get people to find us on social and eventually go to the homepage every day and use that as their jumping off point for finding out what's going on in Philly. So you can't do that if you're pursuing that strategy. You don't have a place to send your loyal readers to, right? Because the homepage has always been the province of the people who you finally won over, who come to you as sort of as an intentional act rather than stumbling upon you in social. And we know that people who come through the homepage average 2.5 times as many pages per session than people who come in via social. So we want people to come in through the homepage. So we need to have a homepage for that. But certainly in other circumstances, I can see why one might pursue that model.
I'll take advantage of the last question. Then I know that Brant has instructions for people about demonstrations and stuff. And this is just a question to set you up. When we see your slides, everything looks really simple and logical and well thought out. And by the end of it, people are going, yeah, that's the way to do it. That makes a lot of sense. Yet so few sites are doing it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think you have to, certainly I think that a lot of the ones that were on that slide earlier, if you look at what Nootropic's doing in Miami or Charlotte Agenda in Charlotte, there's a lot of people pursuing this sort of model. Everybody's doing a little bit differently in how they're paying for it. Nootropic is funding itself largely through agency work. Same thing with the Evergrey in Seattle, and Voice of San Diego, which is a nonprofit, but also doing really interesting local work, and I think shares a lot of these philosophies, makes a lot of it on membership. But I think the core reason is because most of the money in local media is still in legacy media companies that are kind of behind the 8 ball for reasons I cited earlier. I don't think you could, if you got the CEOs of the 10 biggest newspaper companies in the country and put them in this room and said, this is what the future local site should look like, or what the strategy for it should be, I don't even think they'd argue most of what's on there. But the question is, can they do it? Because they're based in a business that, where the ad model is so dominant that to say like we're just going to like walk away from advertising and try to do a lot of events or do membership, I just don't think, I don't know how you change that in stream like this, because they're already like fighting. You know, it's the metaphor that somebody used when I was at the Post was when I was, as usual, annoyed that the digital side of things wasn't getting as much attention as I felt like it should. One of the people on the business side of the newspaper said, look, let me just put it to you this way. There's nobody inside this place who doesn't think digital is important. But right now what it is a great little garden by the side of the road that we're watering appropriately. Well, I have a tractor trailer jackknifing in front of me, which is my print business. And you're asking me to worry about this little thing on the side of the road when I'm about to die over here. So I'll get back to you when I figure out how to avoid this jackknifing tractor trailer. And that tractor trailer is still jackknifing. Right? So what point can somebody look up and say, now let's look at the garden over here? And I think obviously people are still paying attention to it. And a lot of places like the Post for a long time, I think rightfully so, had a whole different group of people maintaining that garden than trying to avoid the jackknifing tractor trailer. But most organizations didn't. So the same people were trying to like deal with these two things. And what's going to get your attention? Obviously the thing that's about to kill you. So I think that's really the problem, but that hasn't changed that much. I don't know how you could like snap your fingers and make a site like Billy Penn for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Not because it's like amazingly great, it's just so different than what they do, and they're not in a position to be very different in a week. They're in a position to be different in 5 years. And so I think that's what we're trying to take advantage of. And to be honest, most of the places, I'm just closing a funding round right now. And one of the things I hear from a lot of the newspaper companies I talk to is the reason we're interested in you is because you're doing something we can't do. Like it's like we know it's the right thing, but we don't have the ability to do it in-house for some of the reasons I laid out, but also because the way people think is that like linking out to other sites is still something most people in print newsrooms don't want to do. And so you have a cultural problem and you have a financial problem. So I just think that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get to that place where I think that most local sites will be in 5-10 years. We're just trying to get there faster because we don't have the baggage to lug along.
Thank you, Jim. Great observations.